Imagine standing in the worst moment in human history. The economy has collapsed. Buying food requires a scan of your hand. Your family is hungry, and the choice in front of you is simple and brutal. Take the mark, or don't eat. Now imagine you were told your whole life that you would never face that moment, that you'd be gone before it ever arrived. What happens to your faith when the moment comes, and you're still standing in it, before a single disaster falls? Before one seal breaks, before one trumpet sounds, before one bowl of judgment is poured out. Revelation 7 does something no one talks about. It stops everything. 4 angels, 4 corners of the earth, holding back 4 winds. Nothing moves. Not the land, not the sea, not a single tree. The entire storm, frozen mid-breath. And the question you should be asking right now is simple. Why? Why would God halt the coming catastrophe before it even begins? What is so important that everything has to stop and wait? Then, a voice cuts through. Do not harm the earth, or the sea, or the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. Sealed. Marked as God's own. Before the trouble is allowed to resume, God will not let the worst begin until His people are accounted for. Hold that thought, because it tells you something massive before a single word about the tribulation is spoken. God knows exactly where His people are. He sees them. He marks them. He will not release the storm until that is done. But here is where it gets complicated, because right after the sealing, 2 groups appear in the text. And these 2 groups have divided Bible teachers, split churches, and fueled the biggest end-times debate of the last 2 centuries. One group is on earth. The other is in heaven. And the group in heaven, standing before the throne in white robes, is the one that launched the most popular escape theology the church has ever produced. Millions of believers have pointed to that group and said, "There, that's us. We made it out. We were taken before any of this touched us." It sounds right. It reads clean. It feels like exactly the promise you were hoping to find. But there is a question nobody asked about that group. A question sitting in the very next line of the text, and the answer breaks the whole reading apart. 2 groups appear in Revelation 7, and they are not the same group. This distinction matters more than almost anything else in the entire end-times debate, because how you read these 2 groups determines everything that follows. The first group, 144,000 people, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, named one by one in the text: Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher. The list goes on. Deliberate, specific, unmistakably Jewish. And where are they? On earth. Sealed, protected, not removed, not raptured, marked by God and preserved through the trouble, right where they stand. Think about what that means for a moment. Across history, Jewish people have been made the scapegoat for the world's problems. Blamed, hunted, expelled, killed, generation after generation. And here, in the middle of the worst period in human history, God looks at His ancient people and says something that should stop you cold. They are mine. I see them, and I will keep them. Sealed on earth, not taken out of it. Now the second group. John looks again, and this time there is no number, no list, no counting possible. A multitude so large no human mind can calculate it. From every nation, every tribe, every language, every people group on earth represented, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, dressed in white robes, palms in their hands, and they are in heaven. Right here is where the most popular end-times reading in the last 200 years plants its flag. Listen to the argument at full strength, because it deserves that. The church, believers from every nation, already in heaven, already before the throne, already in white. And where in the timeline does this appear? Right after the 6th seal, before the trumpet judgments even begin, before the worst of it lands. So the reading says, there it is, the proof. The church was taken up before the Great Tribulation started. We were spared. We escaped. It is right there on the page. Read quickly. It sounds airtight. The multitude is in heaven. The worst is still coming on the earth. What more evidence do you need? and for decades, for generations. That reading has been taught from pulpits, printed in study Bibles, dramatized in novels and films, repeated so many times that questioning it feels almost dangerous. But here is the problem. Nobody stopped to read the next line. One of the elders turns to John and asks him a question about that multitude in white robes. A simple question. Who are these people? And where did they come from? And John, the man who wrote the book, says he doesn't know. So the elder answers him. And the answer is two words. Two words that change everything that came before them. The elder looks at John, points to the multitude in white robes, and says, "These are they which came out of great tribulation." Out of. Not before. Not instead of. Not carried around. Out of. You cannot come out of something you were never in. That is not a theological argument. That is basic logic. If you were removed before the storm hit, you did not come out of the storm. You were never in it. But the text says they came out of it, and it gets more specific than that. The original language describes a continuous action, not a single exit event, not one moment where everyone is lifted out at once. A stream. A steady, ongoing procession of people coming out of the Great Tribulation, one by one, across the whole length of it, coming out and still coming out as the trouble unfolds. This is not a rescue before the fire. This is a procession through it. Now ask the obvious question. If they are coming out one by one across the entire period of the tribulation, how are they getting out? Because the answer to that question is where most people stop reading. Go back to the 6th chapter. Before Revelation 7 even begins, the 5th seal opens, and John sees something beneath the altar in heaven. Souls, not bodies. Souls. The souls of people who had been killed specifically for holding to the word of God and the testimony they carried. Martyrs. And they are crying out, "How long, Lord? How long before you judge the earth and avenge what was done to us? How long?" The cry of people who went through something, who paid for something, who did not escape. These are the same people. The multitude standing in white robes before the throne in Revelation 7. They are the accumulated company of those martyrs, building across the whole period of the tribulation, growing in number as the trouble deepens. They came out of it the way the martyrs came out of it, through death, through faithfulness held all the way to the end. One by one they washed their robes white, not by being lifted to safety, but by laying down their lives and being received on the other side. That is how this multitude got to heaven. Not through an exit door before the trial began, through the trial itself. And if that still feels like it could be argued either way, the next detail closes the door completely. It is a detail most people have heard read at funerals. A passage about hunger, and thirst, and scorching heat, and tears. And what those four things tell us about where this multitude has been is the evidence that cannot be explained away. Revelation 7 ends with a promise, and promises only make sense when you understand what they are responding to. Read this slowly. They shall hunger no more. Stop there. They shall hunger no more. That word, more, is doing enormous work. It assumes something. It assumes they had been hungry, real hunger. The kind that comes from being shut out, from having no access, from refusing something that would have fed them, but cost them everything. They had been hungry, and now they are not. Neither thirst anymore. Same construction, same assumption. They had thirsted. Genuinely, painfully. The thirst of people who could not buy water, because buying anything required what they refused to give. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. They had been under the sun, exposed, unprotected, and not just any sun. Revelation 16 describes the sun being turned into a weapon, intensified until it burns human skin. They were under that sun, that specific heat. It had touched them. And then this: God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. Tears. Ask yourself one honest question. Why would there be tears to wipe from the faces of people who were lifted to safety before any of it began? What did they cry about? What pain produced those tears if they were gone before the first seal ever broke? Tears have to be earned. You do not weep over a fire that never touched you. These people wept because they were in it, hungry and thirsty and scorched and hunted and killed across the full length of the worst chapter in human history. And when it was over, when they had come through the last of it and stood before the throne, the first thing God did was not hand them a crown. The first thing he did was reach out and wipe the tears from their faces. That is the picture of a God who was present in the fire, who counted every tear while it fell, who waited on the other side, not to say well done for escaping, but well done for staying. The tears prove they were in it. The comfort proves he was with them. And now look at where this chapter sits inside the whole book of Revelation, because the position is not random, and what it reveals about the structure of the entire book is something almost nobody points out. Stop reading verse by verse for a moment. Stand back. Imagine the entire book of Revelation laid out flat. One continuous scroll, the way John wrote it. No chapter numbers, no verse breaks, just the whole thing visible at once. A shape appears. 3 times, in the middle of the tribulation, the narrative stops, not pauses naturally, stops deliberately. The disasters freeze, the judgments hold, and in that silence, the camera turns. And every single time it turns, it points at God's people. First stop, after the 6th seal. That is Revelation 7, the chapter just decoded. The sealing of Israel, the multitude coming out of the tribulation, the tears being wiped. The story stops to show you what is happening to God's people while the world burns. Second stop, after the 6th trumpet, Revelation 10 and 11. An angel hands John a small scroll and tells him to eat it. Sweet going in, bitter going down. The truest description ever written of what it costs to take this book seriously. Then 2 witnesses appear. They prophesy. They cannot be silenced until their testimony is finished. Then they are killed. Their bodies left in the street. The world celebrates. And then God raises them up, calls them into heaven, while their enemies watch. The pattern is identical. Faithfulness, then death, then resurrection, not escape. Through. Third stop, before the bowl judgments. Revelation 12 and 13. The dragon, the beast, the false prophet, a counterfeit trinity hunting the people of God, systematically, globally. Now ask one question. If God's people were already removed before any of this began, who is being hunted in chapter 13? You do not build a global system to hunt people who are not there. You do not pause a storm 3 times to check on people who are not standing in it. The 3 pauses exist because God's people are present through the entire period. And each pause is God saying the same thing in a different way. In the middle of all of this, I have not forgotten them. Look, I am still watching. The throne has not moved. And that throne, the one John is shown before any seal is broken, holds a final clue that ties everything together. 24 elders seated around it. Not 12, not 23. That number is not decorative. It splits into 12 and 12. And what those 2 groups of 12 represent was set in place before the tribulation ever began. But there is something even more direct than the structure, something Jesus said himself, with his own words, about the exact timing of the gathering. And it is the most overlooked statement in the entire end times debate. Jesus is sitting on the Mount of Olives. His disciples come to him privately, and they ask the question that has driven the end times debate ever since. When will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming? Jesus answers them directly. No parable, no symbol, plain language. A sequence of events laid out one after another, and buried inside that answer is a statement that should have ended the pre-trib debate before it ever started. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his chosen ones from the 4 winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Immediately after the tribulation, the gathering happens. Not before, not during, after. Jesus placed the gathering of his people on the other side of the tribulation. Not before it, He said it plainly on a hillside to the people closest to him. But wait, because it is not just Jesus. Paul writes to a church that is panicking. They think the day of the Lord has already come. They think they missed it. And Paul calms them down with a sequence. That day will not come unless the great falling away comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. The gathering cannot happen. Paul says, cannot, before two things occur: a global rejection of truth, and the Antichrist stepping into full view. If the church is gone before the Antichrist is revealed, Paul's sequence makes no sense. He wrote it as a comfort, as proof that they had not missed the gathering yet, because the Antichrist had not appeared yet, which means the gathering had not happened yet. The sequence demands the church is present to witness the Antichrist's rise. Now, to be fair, there is one verse that pre-trib teachers anchor to heavily, Revelation 3:10, Jesus speaking to one of the seven churches. I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. Keep you from. That sounds like removal. That sounds like exit before entry. But look at how the same construction is used elsewhere. In John 17, Jesus prays for his disciples. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. Same phrasing, keep from, while still in the world. Keep from does not mean removed before. It means protected through, guarded within, present but covered. And the ancient pattern confirms it. Noah did not escape the flood from a distance. He went through it, in the ark, on the water, surrounded by the very judgment God sent. Lot was not warned years before Sodom burned. The angels pulled him out the same morning the fire fell. God's pattern across history is not removal before judgment. It is protection through it. Jesus said after. Paul said, not until the Antichrist is revealed. The typology says through. So how did before become the dominant teaching? How did a reading that contradicts Jesus' own timeline become what most of the evangelical world believes? The answer is hidden in a specific decade, and what happened in that decade was passed off as ancient truth. Follow the trail backward, not to the book of Revelation, not to the letters of Paul, further back than that, to the men who learned from the people who knew the apostles personally. The earliest church teachers, the ones closest to the source, wrote extensively about the end times, about the Antichrist, about the Great Tribulation, about what God's people should expect, and not one of them taught that the church would be removed before the trouble began. Not one. They wrote about believers enduring the reign of the Antichrist, about the church being present during the final persecution, about suffering as the path through, not the exit door out. These were not fringe voices. These were the theological fathers of the Christian faith, taught by people who walked with the apostles, writing within living memory of the resurrection. Their unanimous expectation was not escape, it was endurance. That position held for centuries. Through Roman persecution, through the Dark Ages, through the Reformation, through waves of revival and decline. For roughly 1,800 years, the idea that the church would be secretly removed before the tribulation began had no systematic expression in Christian theology. Then came the 1830s. A British theologian began developing a new framework for reading prophecy, a system that divided history into distinct ages. That drew a sharp line between Israel and the church, and that placed the church's removal before the final 7 years of tribulation. The framework spread, crossed the Atlantic, found fertile ground in American Christianity. Decades later, a reference Bible was published with this framework printed in the notes, right alongside the scripture text. Millions of readers absorbed the interpretation as if it were part of the inspired word itself. Then came the novels, dozens of them, tens of millions of copies sold. Fiction that dramatized the pre-trib sequence so vividly that the story felt more real than the theology. A doctrine with no systematic expression for 1,800 years became, within a few generations, what Christians have always believed. But they have not always believed it. And right now, today, there are hundreds of millions of believers on this earth, living through tribulation-level persecution, imprisoned, killed, shut out of economic life, forced to choose between faith and survival, in North Korea, in China, in Nigeria, across the Middle East. No rapture has come for them. They are enduring, exactly the way Revelation describes. And if God allows that now, the infrastructure being built in the rest of the world right now should make every person paying attention deeply uncomfortable. The mark of the beast is not primarily an economic system. That is the part most people miss. Yes, Revelation describes a world where no one can buy or sell without it, where economic life is completely tied to a mark on the right hand or the forehead, where refusing it means being locked out of everything. But the mark is not fundamentally about money. It is about worship. Taking the mark is a declaration, an allegiance, a public statement that says, I recognize this authority over my life. I submit to this system. I choose this king. Refusing it says the opposite, which means the person standing at the scanner, hungry, afraid, family behind them, is not being asked a financial question. They are being asked a worship question, disguised as a transaction. And here is what should get your attention. The infrastructure that prophecy requires already exists, not in some distant future, not in a science fiction scenario. Right now, in countries you recognize, in stores you may have walked through, biometric payment systems are live and expanding. Your palm, the unique vein pattern beneath your skin, can now authorize a purchase. Your face can complete a transaction. Your body is becoming the card. Digital identity tied to economic access is no longer theoretical. It is policy in multiple nations and growing. A generation ago, this required imagination to picture. Today, it requires nothing but a news search to confirm. This is not a claim that the mark has arrived. The mark, as Revelation describes it, is a specific act of worship under a specific global authority that does not yet exist in its final form. But the world being built right now, for reasons of convenience, security, and efficiency that have nothing to do with prophecy, is the exact world the prophecy requires. The technology came first. The authority will follow. And when it does, the choice will not feel like a theological question. It will feel like a practical one. Feed your family, or hold your confession. Which is exactly why Jesus warned us, not to frighten, but to prepare. Because a believer who knows what the question actually is will not be deceived by the form it arrives in. And that preparation, the kind that sees through the transaction to the worship question underneath, starts with a promise that most people never received. If the comfort was never escape, what is it? Consider two doctors, same patient, same scan, same diagnosis. The first doctor looks at the results, says nothing difficult, sends the patient home with a smile, lets what is coming arrive without warning. The second doctor sits down, makes eye contact, and tells the truth. Here is what is coming. Here is how it progresses. Here is what to watch for. Here is how to be ready. Which doctor actually loves the patient? Jesus is the second kind. He told his people plainly, the fire is coming. He described it in detail. He mapped the sequence. He named the signs. He warned about the deception. He said, when you see these things, do not be surprised. Do not lose heart. I told you first. That warning is not cruelty. It is the deepest form of care, and it produces something the escape promise never could: readiness that holds when the moment arrives. Because here is the honest logic. Prepare for the tribulation. Study the profile. Understand the mark as a worship question. Build community. Settle your allegiance now, and then be raptured before any of it matters. What did you lose? Nothing. You grew. You studied. You built something real. Your faith deepened. Your discernment sharpened. Your community strengthened. Then you were taken home early. The preparation cost you nothing, but failed to prepare. Assume the exit is coming. Build nothing. Settle nothing. Leave the worship question unanswered. And then stand in the moment the scanner requires an answer, with an empty stomach and no foundation under you. The cost of that assumption is everything. The safest position is preparation. The most dangerous position is certainty about the timing. And this is not a call to fear. It is a call to the kind of faith that can hold weight. Both sides of this debate love the same Lamb. Both are washed in the same blood. Both will stand before the same throne. The disagreement is about sequence, not about the king. So prepare, regardless of where you land on the timing. Because on the other side of the worst thing that will ever happen, God reaches out and does something so simple it should break you open. He wipes the tears from their faces. Not after a comfortable wait in heaven, after the fire, after the hunger and the thirst and the scorching heat and the grief. He reaches out and wipes them away. The comfort was never departure. The comfort was always, I was there. I counted every one, and I am still here now. So the question was never, will I get out in time? The question was always, will I stay standing when it costs everything to stand? And staying standing requires knowing what you are standing on before the ground starts shaking. Settle it now, while the confession costs nothing but pride. While the answer to the worship question can be worked out quietly, while the scanner is not in front of you. Because the day is coming, whether the timing looks exactly as you expect or completely different, when the question underneath every transaction will be visible to anyone with eyes to see it. And the believers who saw it coming, who understood what was being asked, who had already answered it in the quiet before the storm, will be the ones still standing when everyone around them is falling. These are they which came out of great tribulation, came out, through it, one by one, robes washed white, not by escaping the fire, but by walking through it and refusing to let go. Now, there is one passage that has not been touched yet, a passage that pre-trib teachers consider their strongest evidence. The verse that, on the surface, seems to make everything argued here collapse. Most people who challenge the pre-trib reading never deal with it directly, because it is more complicated than either side admits. And what it actually says, when you read the whole context, changes the question entirely.